My guest today is Drew Farrant-Jayet. Drew grew up in Parkes and at some point ended up in Sydney. He's a musician. He's a person who's committed to social issues. He's spent some time in Central Australia. He's done a master's in social work. He's a very interesting guy, which is why we've got him on the podcast. Drew, you've had a lot of experiences. I'm sure you've learnt lots along the way, and it's my job today to tease some of that out of you. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So Parkes is where you were from.
Yeah. So grew up in Parkes, wonderful community, Central West New South Wales. It's just a small country town, and I'm really fortunate to have experienced growing up there.
Yeah, one of the things, my best move ever was moving out of Sydney to the country, and I lived in Armidale for 7 years. I started out, I went to teachers college there. The best thing about it was living in and having people from all over the state come and study at Armidale. And it was just such a rich community, and we have people from Parkes, and I still keep in touch with some of them. I'm really looking forward to getting out and meeting up with a friend of mine who lives in Parkes and going off in the far west, but none of that just for the moment because we're all in lockdown and all of that stuff. So Parkes, you went to school there and you got into music at some point. What was the story behind that?
I think I got into music a little bit out of boredom. The country towns are a limit, I guess, in sometimes what they can offer young people, unless you're fairly sports oriented. Yeah, I found a guitar laying around at home, one of my mum's old guitars. I just found that I had an affinity towards it, and just became pretty obsessed with it, really. And through learning guitar and music, I was able to make some wonderful lifelong connections within the community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can see a couple of surfboards behind you. Are they yours or your housemates?
One is mine, one is my partner's.
Okay.
So obviously,
do you get out much? Obviously, you're not surfing in Parkes.
No,
they're nice looking boards.
Yeah. The 9.6 is mine. I got it from a shaper in Chisholm, in Torquay. I spent a little bit of time, living in Jan Juc, so surfing Bells Beach and stuff. So which is completely different to Parkes, but also an experience.
Okay, well, awesome. Music and surfing, two of my lifelong passions. So from Parkes, you connected up with a couple of guys from Parkes, I gather, and formed a band. And what did you call yourselves?
We were called Bears with Guns. Pretty ridiculous band name, I know, but you just pick something and roll with it.
Yeah, totally.
A couple of the guys I grew up with, the singer Rob, I grew up with, but he actually moved away for a number of years, went and lived in Canberra, and we reconnected in Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you make a living out of it? Or did you try to make a living out of it?
We sure tried. Look, I guess the real success for us was that we were supported by friends and family to pursue our interests in music and creativity. And that's just a real privilege in itself, I think. Not everyone is fortunate enough to be exposed to just have the freedom to pursue creativity, and it just led to some wonderful experiences. We got to travel around Australia, meet amazing people, and just have a real fun time in our early 20s. So
fabulous. Well, you can't be too much older now. Have you broken the 30 barrier?
I was, 31 a couple of days ago. So
Okay, well, happy birthday.
thank you.
So you were the guitarist in the band. Like, what kind of band are we talking? Like an indie, alternative, rootsy style band?
Yeah, that's pretty much on the money.
Oh,
Yeah.
I got it.
Pretty folky.
But
Yeah. I
yeah,
think if you have an animal in the band title, then it hints towards folk music.
right. Okay. Well, why don't we play a little bit of it now? And I'll just beam it up here.
I'll be fine. Yeah, yeah, I'll be fine. It's been told, all before that you gon' keep me still. I must move on. Oh, in order to collect the thrill.
Well, that's heaps fun, Drew. I like the harmonica touch. Is that you or someone else in the band?
That's Angus, the percussionist slash
Okay.
harmonica player. So
Yeah. And there was a little bit of a clip there of you busking at one of my favourite places to listen to music there in Queenstown.
yeah. I absolutely loved Queenstown. Yeah. It's so great. Felt a bit like
Yeah,
Narnia.
The last person I heard there, it's been a few years since I've been back to New Zealand, but he was just some crazy haired dude sitting with a piano that he used to wheel out of the back of a truck. And it was just a broken down piano, but the guy could play. My
Yeah,
goodness. I don't think he'd ever learnt a note in his life. He's just one of these people who just sits at the piano and plays randomly. But
yeah,
I was mesmerised. You know, my family went off and did other things. I just sat there and listened to this guy.
yeah.
So congratulations on your years in the band, and
Thank you.
big hats off to your family and supporters for giving you that privilege to invest a season of your life traveling around and doing music. That's a wonderful privilege that you've had. And
Absolutely.
yeah, good stuff. And did you do like support acts for any big names?
Yeah, actually, we were incredibly fortunate to land a small run of shows supporting Icehouse. That was probably a highlight for us. Yeah, a couple of shows in RSL clubs along the East Coast. I think we played one in Sawtell, Taraji,
Yeah.
somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
awesome.
that was a leading question because I knew the answer. And Icehouse, of course, were a big band in the late 80s and early 90s. And yeah, to have played alongside a group like that really was one of the top 5 Australian bands at the time. That's heaps fun. And for you from Parks to be traveling around and going to all these different places, I'm sure there's a lot of experiences that you had that, you know, you
Yeah.
treasure and remember.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just such a wonderful time. Yeah.
So tell us, you laid it all down. Was that because, you know, you all came to a mutual agreement, or, you know, you spat the dummy and walked off, or, you know, how did all end?
Um, so I left. The band continued for several more years.
But you didn't spit the dummy, right?
No, of course
No.
not. The reasons for my leaving the band were more to do with just wanting more personal freedom.
Mm.
The band became quite a full-time project that was, you know, requiring a lot of rehearsals, a lot of financial investment for recordings, all that sort of stuff. And I just found myself wanting to go camping on weekends and go surfing and, you know, that kind of stuff. And I found that I I had a great time with it, but it was time for me to pursue other interests, study. Yeah. So decided to
For
make the
sure.
call.
Yes. And so you studied social work, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And that took you to a placement at Alice Springs. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I was incredibly fortunate to land such an amazing learning opportunity in being placed at Alice Springs Hospital. Um, yeah, Alice Springs Hospital it's the main hospital in Central Australia. I think it has a catchment area of about 2/3 of the Northern Territory. Um, I think, yeah, it's population of about 50,000 people. I know 40% of the catchment area is indigenous Australians. However, in the hospital itself, about 85 to 90% of patients were Aboriginal. So it fortuned me a, a cultural immersion experience. So yeah, it was really great learning.
And presumably you'd not had anything quite like that before. What did you learn from that experience?
I guess that we don't have to travel far to immerse ourselves in other cultures, and there is such an abundance of amazing Aboriginal cultures in Central Australia. I was meeting people who, they were speaking English as their third, fourth, or fifth spoken language. Yeah, I guess it also exposed me to some of the social issues and health issues that are out there, which are often quite sad. But yeah, it was really great learning as a social work student.
And what was your role in that placement?
A little bit of everything. The social work department was short staffed, so I kind of hit the ground running. And I got some experience in palliative care, mental health wards, intensive care, predominantly the emergency department. So a lot of responding to crisis situations, and arranging safe discharge planning, which was a massive challenge. There was a lot of domestic violence victims that were admitted to hospital, and trying to support them to return safely to the community was often a challenge, because I guess there are resources there, but it's probably vastly under-resourced. Safe accommodation, yeah, all that sort of thing.
And from there, you stayed on in the Northern Territory for some reason that I can't quite remember the detail of. Tell us.
I guess when I was working in the hospital, I was quite often meeting patients that had traveled from far and wide communities, and it piqued my interest. I wanted to know what life was like in some of these remote Australian communities. And I applied for a job as a youth engagement officer for the Macdonald Regional Council. I wasn't sure at first which community it was going to be in. I think they were looking for workers in several communities, and I was really fortunate that I scored that job, and they asked if I would feel comfortable going to Kintor, and I'd never heard of Kintor.
No.
Well, actually, I had heard of Kintor in the Midnight Oil song. And yeah, I looked it up, and I thought, yeah, why not? It'll be an excellent opportunity just to see what life is like in one of the most remote parts of Australia.
Very remote. From what I know of it, the people from that area were relocated at some point in the 20th century, more towards Alice Springs, and then with the outstation program or whatever to move people back to the homelands,
Yeah.
a whole group of people moved back out to their ancestral land.
Yeah, that's right. I think in the early 80s, the Pintupi people were really relocated to Papunya, and from there they decided that they wanted to go and live on their homelands, as you say, and so made their way out to Kintore.
Yes. And that kind of movement was happening all over the territory throughout the 80s, and I would imagine it's a great thing, and they're still there now. So presumably it's worked out.
Yeah.
We're just going to be putting up some pictures of where you are while we're talking here, Drew, that you've provided to me. So your role was particularly doing youth and community work. Are there certain stories that illuminate the experience that you had there?
It was just such a new experience for me, going to this remote community, not understanding the cultures, the languages, really having no idea what to expect or what I could be doing. My work there was around providing resources and projects for the youth. Like, I didn't really know how to go about it. So like rule 101 for community development: talk to the people, make connections, talk to the youth, talk to the elders, find out what they want, and go from there. So
and what do they want?
Just the same thing that everyone wants, really, like health, well-being, opportunity. I was able to develop music projects, art projects, learning opportunities. I think a lot of the elders, they would really like for the youth to have cultural learning opportunities. We were able to work quite closely with the elders and to develop some like projects to take youth out bush in their culture, go hunting. Being a part of that was such an amazing experience for myself.
Yeah. What are some of the social issues that are impacting on the lifestyle of people there?
Housing, overcrowded houses, the isolation of the community. It takes so long for fresh food to arrive there, and I found that the price of food was incredibly expensive. Even like $1 for a single carrot, sort of thing. And just a lot of health issues, a lot of kidney disease.
Were there substance abuse issues, or was it a dry community? How did
it was a dry community. I think they've been quite successful in Kintore for keeping it a dry community. I don't recall there being many issues there. I think, maybe because of how long how far away from Alice Springs it is. I'm not too sure, but it's
because I know that petrol sniffing and ice have ran wild in various indigenous communities, but some have been completely spared that.
No, it was I didn't experience anything like that. So
How did they receive you?
I was quite nervous about going into a community as a young white privileged male. I was amazed at how welcoming families and the whole community were. You're a new face for the youth to get to know, and if you go into a new community with an open mind and a listening attitude, you'll be received and welcomed.
That's good to hear. The weather. I mean, it's a trivial question, but you are in the middle of Australia, one of the most remote communities in the country. Was it like frightfully hot or bitterly cold at night? What did you have to deal with there?
Yeah, so I think when I was there, it was one of the hottest summers on record. There was about 43 consecutive days when I think it was above like 45 degrees or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I got there November. So yeah, got through the summer. It was pretty horrendous, but an interesting experience.
Well, good stuff. Hanging in there and learning what you did and contributing in the way you did. Did music, was that a part of what you were doing there?
Yeah. I think Midnight Oil actually kindly donated some gear to the community several years before I was there, and we were able to develop music programs for the youth, concerts for the community. I met some amazing musicians. I was constantly blown away by how talented everyone was at music.
You mentioned one guy who was particularly talented.
Yeah.
Tell us about him.
So another youth worker, Francis Jungaraya Collins. He is an amazing singer-songwriter who has made some incredible compositions that you can find on YouTube. I know we spoke a little bit about Red Dust. Red Dust, an organization that have traveled out to Kintor and have been involved in the production of some of his songs.
We're going to play a little clip from Francis Collins right now. We've been listening to Francis Collins, one of the gifted musicians in the Kintor community. It must have been hard leaving Drew and coming back to the world that you knew best on the East Coast.
Yeah, look, it was a big transition. I guess one of the challenges in living and working in Kintor was the isolation. Yeah, as much as of it being a massive transition, it was nice to reconnect and take those experiences with me. When I was living in Kintor, I adopted a little dog to keep me company, which certainly helped with the isolation. And he came with me from Kintor. I didn't want to leave him there because I didn't know what was going to happen to him. So he's now residing with a family in South Sydney, living his best life. So,
Was it one of those sort of mad, wild, outback type dogs that just hangs around the fire?
Yeah. I actually found him as a little pup covered in ticks and not in a good way at all. So took him home, cleaned him up, fed him, trained him, and he's just a bit of everything. Bit of a camp dog. Probably had a bit of dingo in him, but it was a lovely little fellow. Wesley was his name. Yeah.
Well, that's probably a bit of a metaphor for your life. You've got a heart for the people on the edge and the things that are,
yeah,
not in a good shape.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got you between finishing one job and starting a new job. What's the new job looking like?
The new job is actually an opportunity to work with my passions of people and music. So it's with a charity called Support Act, who I believe are the only charity in Australia to provide mental health support and services for musicians and performing artists. And my role is around looking at the applications for COVID grants. So the government has provided up to 20 million, I believe, for crisis payments for musicians and performing artists to apply for. So I'll be talking to musicians and performing artists across Australia and hopefully supporting them financially through this COVID crisis.
Yeah, well, I can see you bringing both your natural empathy and your music background to bear on that placement. So I'm excited for you, and certainly our musicians and artists and event managers and hiring places, and there's so many places that have been impacted and some decimated over the last 12, 18 months. So yeah, we need people like you who can get in there and be an advocate and provide assistance and make it easier for people to get the money that they so fully deserve so that they can keep doing what they do. We need artists in this country to keep playing and singing, and need poets to keep writing and all
Absolutely.
of that.
Yeah, it's in working with in providing support to the musicians and artists, it's providing culture for the rest of Australians of Australia to enjoy.
Well said. So you've done your masters in social work. If you could project 5-10 years down the track, what would you like to be doing?
I still just want to be working on my professional development. I want to get as much experience in as many different areas of social work as possible. I still would love to be involved in living and in getting experiences in remote communities, whether here or in other parts of the world, learning about cultures. Maybe finding ways to incorporate music with social work. Basically, I just want to move forward, absorbing as much experience as possible.
Well, thanks so much for your time chatting today, Drew. Yours is a story of what we could call an ordinary bloke who's lived an extraordinary young life. You've moved from parks, and there's a richness in being in the country. I don't think life starts when you move to the city. Far from it. The fact that you grew up in parks and you have all those experiences, and what it's like to be part of a regional community, that itself is a real asset as well. Plus, you've lived the city life, you've traveled Australia, you've been in a band, you've been on tour, you've lived on the edge, you've traveled, you've put yourselves in situations where you've clearly been out of your depth, but you wanted to challenge yourself, you wanted to learn and grow, and you wanted to be a better human for it all. So good stuff, mate, and all the very best going forward. I look forward to hearing the next installment of Drew Farrant-Jayet.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share some of these experiences and for the lovely, kind words. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Drew.